Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another London Power BI user group, the virtual ones. Today we have Asker, who is the Microsoft MVP. He's the owner of North Insights. I got that right. And he comes from the lovely Iceland. Well, he's not there anymore. He moved to Denmark, but he comes from Iceland. And yeah, last time I was there with the SQL Saturday Iceland, he took me to the really amazing steak place. I think that's when I started eating steak. Before that, I used to not like actually like it. I've always used to say no, but that's basically what changed me. And the other thing I'd observed in that SQL Saturday Iceland was like if you want your beer cold, you don't keep it in the fridge, you keep it outside. That was epic. But yeah, it's really nice to have you here in London Power BI user group. And thank you so much for quickly saying yes. Because I was thinking after a few DAX sessions, I thought we need a session which is like a very, very important, like the governance and talking about being a Power BI admin. And then I was talking to Casper about it, and then Casper was like, "Yeah, you should ask Asker." And I was like, "Of course, Asker." And then that's when I immediately approached you, and you nicely said yes. Thank you so much. So before taking any more time, I'm gonna hand it over to Asker. But just a few things to say before that is please mute yourself during the session until unless you have something to say, like if you have a question or something. But if you can save up your questions to the end, that would be really useful. And please use chat window for any questions. Me and I think me and James would be summarizing the questions, and James will probably try to summarize using a PowerPoint slide or something. But we will see. That worked really well last time, so I think we're gonna do the same thing again. And as James already mentioned before, we will be recording the session. So if you have any problems, not to be like if you don't want to be recorded, please either leave or yeah. Yeah, I don't know what else. But yeah, that's all from me. And to Asker.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna now share my screen. So hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the session about the Power BI Administrator and Governance. As Prati said so well, my name is Ásgeir Gunnarsson. I come originally from Iceland. I own a company called North Insights, which is in Denmark, where I live now. Just in the lower right-hand corner is that I just want to point out this nice mascot that I have. My daughter just drew it for me, so I'm very proud of it. And I'm going to have it on all my sessions after this. So the agenda for this session is that I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the Power BI Administrator. Then I'm going to talk about what the main task of the Power BI Administrator is. And then I'm going to go into governance. So I'm going to briefly talk about what governance is for when it comes to Power BI. And then I'm gonna more focus on the administrator and what role does the administrator play in the governance effort, and what tasks do they have. Before I dive in, I just want to tell you a little bit of a background of why I'm so interested in this part of it. The main reason is that I used to work for a company that was implementing Power BI a few years ago. And we implemented Power BI. I started using Power BI before we started implementing it, and then we started implementing it. And because I was the first and the best to use Power BI, I became the administrator. And I had no idea what it was to be an administrator. So I just, did nothing basically, and until someone asked something of me. But of course, there comes all these questions: how is our implementation effort going? Are people doing what they're supposed to be doing? Why can I not do this? Why is this turned off? Or all these different questions that come up, and then I need to find out. And what I realized is that if you want to be a good administrator and you want to have your Power BI tenant in a good shape, you really need to do some good administration and governance effort. Otherwise, it's just not gonna. You might have a breach, or you're gonna have customers or business partners that are not very happy. So that was a little bit about the background. So let's dive into the agenda. So generally speaking, not necessarily for Power BI, a administrator is responsible for a platform. So if you have an administrator for any platform, they're normally responsible for the platform. They might be legally responsible, they might not, and they are usually play part in the governance, and but their most important task is operational. So they make sure that the software or the tenant or whatever it is, it runs smoothly. So you have to have smooth operations and you have to know what's going on. Now, of course, Power BI is only a smaller part of a bigger thing. So the legal responsibility might lay somewhere else, but the rest of it is something that the Power BI administrator is probably going to be involved in. So before we start talking about what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing, let's talk a little bit about what it is, the Power BI administrator. So the Power BI administrator is a role in Microsoft 365. So you give someone this role and then they become an administrator. They can see certain things, but just before we dive into that, I just want to show you. So if you're in the if you're in Microsoft 365 admin, and let me just pick up one user here, which is myself. And you will see that this user has a role, which is a Power BI admin. There are many roles within Microsoft 365, and Power BI is just one of them. So you can be Exchange, of course, Global will have everything. So you can have all these different roles in here, and Microsoft Power BI admin is one of those. So there's nobody within Power BI that can give someone a Power BI admin. So a Power BI administrator cannot give someone else the administrative rights of Power BI. It has to be done within Microsoft 365. There is another role that sometimes gets a little bit confusing. There is another role called Power Platform Administrator, and that role will give you administration of over the whole Power Platform, so the Power Automate and Power Apps as well. Sorry, just want to go back to that. So it is a role, and the person who has that role, they can see the admin portal within Power BI. They can manage, and I have managed within the question mark quotes. Sorry, the on-premise data gateway, because they can do certain things and certain things they cannot. Of course, if they are given the admin role of the gateway, they can do whatever they want. But if they're just a Power BI administrator, they can only do certain things, and I will show you that. And they can manage capacities as well. This is something that comes out of the books. So this is what they can do, and this is what it is. So what does what is the work of the Power BI administrator? So the work of the Power BI administrator is to be the tenant administrator for the Power BI part. It is the work of the Power BI administrator to take care of capacities. You might delegate that, but it's still the administrator that will do that. You might be the gateway administrator. That's not certain, but you might be. Very often you would at least have enough access to do something about it. And you need to do monitoring, because if you define it as it's your role to make sure it runs monitoring, because otherwise you don't know if it's running smoothly. And of course, when it comes to governance, you don't know what's going on. So if these are the 4 things that you should be doing, then let's go on and talk about those 4. So first of all is the tenant administration. That's probably the biggest one. Now, a tenant in this sense is not, Power BI is not a tenant. Power BI is a subscription within a tenant. So Microsoft 365 has a bunch of subscriptions, but it's only normally one tenant that has maybe Office 365 subscription, Power BI subscription, Power Apps subscription, all these other subscriptions it can have. Power BI is only one of those. So the Power BI administrator will not be a tenant administrator normally, unless they have the global admin role. In that case, of course, they are the tenant administrator as well. So the Power BI administrator only has the subset of the tenant settings, and those settings that the Power BI administrator has are held in the tenant settings in the admin portal of the Power BI portal. So before we dive into those, I just want to backtrack just a little bit, because when I said this here, the tenant administration, capacity, gateway, and monitoring, I just want to take the gateway right now because it's a little bit of a weird one. So because the Power BI administrator can see the admin portal, it doesn't mean that it can do gateway. So I am here logged in as an admin, global admin, and if I go to manage gateways, I will see the gateway. So I see a gateway here. It's not running, but it doesn't matter. So I can see it, I can manage it, and the only administrator of it. If I go in as another user, which is a Power BI admin as well, they won't see the gateway at all. But if they go to the Power Platform admin center, if they are a Power BI administrator, they will see the gateway here on the data preview. So I can see the gateway here, even though I won't see it in the Power BI portal. What I can and cannot do is that here I can actually go in and I can say, I can manage users. So I can say that, someone can use it or cannot use it. But there is a catch here. Even though I put users on here, they can only use it within the rest of the Power Platform, not in Power BI. So you could say that it is you can manage it in a certain way, but not really manage it in any meaningful way from within Power BI, unless you are added as a gateway administrator, and then of course you can do anything. So the gateway administrator does not have to be the Power BI administrator, and the Power BI administrator is not necessarily the gateway administrator. So there is a disconnect there. Of course, gateway administration is really, really important, but it's more, it is partly here to administrate the data sources, but it's actually more on the actual server or computer that holds the gateway to make sure that it's running properly. And that is very often outside of the scope of the Power BI administrator, although that being the Power BI person in the organization might fall on your shoulders as well. Okay. The next thing we want to talk about is the tenant administration, because that's where the brunt of the work goes. So the tenant administration is very important, and it has all these different settings that you can do. Now, generally speaking, because the Power BI administrator is not a tenant administrator, they have nothing to do with the users, and they have nothing to do with policies in Active Directory, which force multi-factor authentication or anything like that. So those are things that are left to the tenant administration. So there's a bunch of things that is done outside of Power BI that affect Power BI. Licensing is one other thing, and many other things. But the Power BI administrator has some things you can do. So I have a couple of slides here that are just saying what it is. I'm not going to read them. I'm just rather going to go into and talk about it. But for your sake, this is I have taken a little each section of the administration portal and told a little bit what it is and what it isn't. So let's go back into the Power BI portal and talk about the settings. So if I go to the admin portal, there are a bunch of different settings here, and they actually change and grow and move regularly. For example, the Power BI premium per user, this is a brand new one here. My tenant has been upgraded, although I haven't enabled it yet. Usage metrics, first of all, it's just it's not something you can do about. This is something there for you, but I would take this with a grain of salt. You should definitely think about using the audit log if you want to get a proper usage. This is there's not consistency between this and the audit log, by the way. Users, if you click on it, outside of Power BI. So even though it's in here, you cannot do anything about it unless you are a Microsoft 365 admin. Global admin or license admin, or the different things if you want to, depending on what you want to do. Premium user, like I say, this is brand new. I haven't really looked at it, so I'm not gonna even try to talk about it. There are a few things here I haven't read about it, so it will be something that will you will need to be very good at some point. But at the moment it's in preview, and I haven't really looked at it. So as you can see, if I come down to the fourth here, audit log. So the first four, only one is really some setting you can do something about, because audit log is also in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, where you cannot do anything about it, here in Power BI. There is, of course, a possibility to export the audit logs using the Power BI REST API, but you cannot do anything in the graphical user interface in Power BI. And then the rest of them are actually something you can do something about, which is something that is interesting. First of all, is the tenant settings. This is the big one. This is the tenant settings that the Power BI administrator has any control of. So as I said, there are a bunch of tenant settings around the tenant. But there are, all the rest of it is, handled by, either the global admin or someone in a role that has a possibility to change this. But the Power BI part of it is here. So there are a bunch of things in here that you should probably take a look at and think about. What I normally suggest, and I actually did this exercise with a customer yesterday, where I had gone through all these settings here, and we documented each and every one of those, and we had a discussion about what does it mean? Should it be enabled and disabled, and why? It is not a lot of settings. There's maybe 50 settings here, so it took us an hour meeting to go through it. It probably could have half or something, so it's not like it's horribly much. What I did was, let me just show you. So what I did was that I simply created a document like this, and in it there is a what is the settings? What is this document about? And then this is a setting called tenant-wide look settings. New look should be enabled for the whole entire organization. This was my recommendation, by the way. And then help and support. So basically go through all these different settings and document them. And why do you want to document those? Well, the reason why you want to document those is that you want to be able to know what they should be. There are some of them that are really, really important, and you want to also take an informed decision about them. But if you have multiple administrators and some of them come in here and they say, okay, I'm going to disable this setting here. And this is a simple one. This is maybe a little bit too simple, but let's say you have a setting here that it says it's specific groups only, and this gets changed to something else. If you don't know what it should be, you have a hard time going back to it unless you just have to try to remember it or have the whole discussion again. Because if someone changes this, the only trace of that change is that in the audit log, there will be a row in the audit log saying that this, a workspace settings was changed, and it was changed to this. It doesn't say what it was changed from. So let me show you here an example that I had here. Here I have the audit log. I have access to the audit log because I am the Power BI. I'm the global admin. Sorry, here. So what I wanted to find was the. Let me just go to updated organization Power BI settings. I'm gonna go from yesterday until today. That's fine. And what you will see now, hopefully when this run, is that the setting here will show you that. So there is a saying here that yesterday at 16:04, this person updated the settings. They updated the tenant settings publish get help info to true. Of course, if it's just true and false, it's no problem. But if it is a setting where you have something specific here, you will only see also what it was changed to, but not what it was changed from. And that can get a little complicated. So that's why I suggest that you go through them and you make an informed decision on all of them. Now, there are, of course, some of them that are more important than the others, but I, for example, am a really big fan of the get help information. So I have put it on a SharePoint side in my tenant. So when a person looks at a report and goes to the help here and get help or something like that, or community or learn or documentation, they will be heading to internal site. This is maybe not an important one, but it's a really, really beneficial one. And of course, the big one is the export and sharing. So here is where you will find all the settings that are governance sensitive. And you should definitely go through them all and make sure that you have them set for whatever you want. So, for example, publish to web. It's one of the most talked about setting in Power BI, because if someone publishes something to web, it's open to everyone. It's off by default, luckily, so that you don't, if you have a newest tenant for the last couple of years at least, it will be off by default. But otherwise, you need to go in there and set it to whatever you want it to be. Another one which is really important and often really hard to understand is the export data. You might turn it off because you don't want people to export data, but there's so many things that hang on this. So this has a lot of things. So it will allow you, determine if you can export data or not. But it also controls analyzing Excel. So if this is off, nobody can use analyzing Excel. If someone has, if someone wants to download the PBIX and this is off, they cannot do that. If someone wants to connect to a live Power BI dataset and this is off, they cannot do that. So there's a lot of things that hang on to this, and I hope that Microsoft will make this more granular, so it will help us, maybe split this up in many different settings, so that we don't have to have one setting that is so broad. But this is one that you should probably be, considering a lot before you turn it off, at least. In my mind, at least, there needs to be a really good argument for it. But again, if you have a lot of sensitive data, you might want to only turn this on for a certain group of people. Rest of them, are fairly harmless, a lot of them at least, but go through each one of them and make sure you have an informed discussion about them with your security team, and make sure that people understand what they mean. And then, if they're turned on or turned off, that it's a decision that you made, and then you document that. So, as an administrator, Power BI administrator, you're going to be spending most of your time here in this, in this tenant setting. This is where most of your work will be going. You will set this correctly. You will make it, whatever it should be, and you're gonna just let it sit. So this is, even though I'm saying you're gonna spend most of the time here, this is what, this shouldn't be something that you need to visit every day, or even every week, or even every month. But the one thing you need to be aware of with these tenant settings here is that when Power BI pushes new features, they will also sometimes add new settings. And when they add new settings, they might be on, they might be off, depending on what Microsoft decides. So you need to be aware of that. So for example, template apps are a fairly new one. They have a whole new section about that. And they have advanced networking if you want to use Azure private link, and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of settings that they add. So you need to be, need to monitor this regularly by simply manually going in and checking if everything is as it should be. There's no way to harvest this. You cannot, export it by some with a computer or API or anything like that, unfortunately. One thing more I want to add here is that if you have not turned on the audit log, so there is a setting here for internal activity auditing and compliance. If you have not turned it on, you should definitely do that, because you want to be able to collect the information about what people are doing. You can see it's grayed out in my tenant because this setting has been set within my Microsoft 365. So it's been turned on there, and then I don't have to turn it on here. If it is not on in your Microsoft 365 tenant, you can come in and turn it on only for Power BI here. Because in Microsoft 365, the audit log here is for everything that is, not only Power BI, it's for everything that is in your Microsoft 365. So your SharePoint and, Azure AD and user administration and everything that is, exists within, in the Microsoft 365. So you want, that's why it's also hard to get access to the audit log there. But we're going to come to that a little bit later on. So turn it on if you haven't. If it's been turned on for your organization, it's going to be, it's already been collected, and then you just need to take advantage of it. Okay, so as I said, the administrator is this is the main responsibility of the administrator. Of course, there's a bunch of other things in here that you need to be aware of. Capacity settings is one of them. I don't have Power BI Premium, so it's not going to show really anything for me. But in the capacity settings, what you can do here is that you can assign capacities. Sometimes you can give other people permission to assign capacities to workspaces. If you want to split capacities, or if you want to do things by capacity, or split it up into smaller capacities, or extend it, all those things, you cannot do that within the Power BI admin portal. That has to be done within the Microsoft 365. If you have Power BI embedded, it needs to be done within Azure. So you have, the Power BI administrator only has the ability to make use of the capacity that is already there. They cannot control the capacity. They can restart it, they can, assign it, and they can do, a few things. They can make sure that you can use AI features, how much of the capacity is dedicated to that and different things like that. But they cannot change the capacity in any way. Then you have embed code, and this one is really interesting. You see with me, I have actually quite a few published to web things, but you might not have it. What you might to be sure if you don't have any, if you do have some published to web things, you need to be sure that they are appropriate and allowed. But it's also here if you have internal embed code. So if you have someone has gone to a report and they have what's going on now? I don't want to talk to you. So if they have gone on and set embed the report in SharePoint or website portal, it's also going to be in that embed codes here. So you might have the different embed. Not everything that's in here is now published to web, but a lot of it is. So what you can do here is you can actually turn it off. You can say that delete this code, embed code, and then it doesn't exist anymore. So think about that if you want to go in and check this. Even though you've turned, if you have turned, publish the web off, all of them is going to be, inactive, because as soon as you turn it off, all of the codes are going to be deleted. So you don't have to worry about it if you turn it off. But if you have it on, you need to be, need to think about this. Organizational visuals. This is something that if you have a visuals, store of visuals within your company, this can be a really useful thing if you want to have only your users only to use approved visuals. So this is custom visuals here. So not the built-in visual, but if you want your users to only use certain visuals, you can put them in here and you can restrict them to using only organizational visuals. You can also restrict your users to use only certified visuals, or just not to be able to use custom visuals at all. Of course, you are not restricting them in Power BI Desktop, so they can build things in Power BI Desktop, but when they publish it to PowerBI.com, it's gonna break. So think about it carefully and communicate it well if you're gonna change any of these settings about the organization of custom visuals, because it's not a good experience for a user to build something fantastic using the icon map, for example. If you're gonna talk about the games here. And then publish it to PowerBI.com, and then it just doesn't work because you have closed off all the custom visuals. This is something that the administrator is responsible for. So both what is in the organizational visual store, and also if it is what is allowed here. What you need to be aware of about custom visuals is that some of them will send data to some external services to do calculations or to fetch some information in their APIs, but for example, the built-in Bing Maps does that. But you need to be aware of these things, and that's a reason why you might want to close some of them off. Asia Connection, this is a new one. So what you can do here is that you can bring your own data lake to Power BI. So if you have, if you don't want to use the data lake that is shared across kind of all Power BI users, you can bring your own one. So this is mainly for data flows, which are they going to be stored then in your own data lake instead of being stored in the shared data lake. The workspaces, and this is an interesting one for the administrator, and it can be very, very useful. So basically, this is a list of all your workspaces. Now it doesn't look much, but what it can give you is first of all, it can give you like an inventory of all your visuals, which is a really good one. But they can also, if you have a deleted workspace, let me just sort. So if you have a deleted workspace, you can go in here if there is not too much time since it was deleted. You can go in and restore that. So everything is just soft deleted, and so you can go in and restore something if someone accidentally deletes a workspace or someone does it on purpose, maliciously or something like that. You as an administrator can go in here and you can restore it. You can also go in here and you can edit the workspace, and you can also go on and get the details of it. If you want to get the ID to go to it. What you cannot do is you cannot go in here and let me find something that's not deleted. So you can also go in and give yourself access to it. And this can be very useful if if someone has a company that owns the workspace, something like that, you can take it over basically by going in here, or you can let someone else take it over by adding them to the list. Custom branding is another one that it's a little bit useful. I don't know. A lot of companies do this. It's just very nice to be able to see. But you're only really changing the banner up here, and it's up to you if you feel that it's important. Then you can do it here. Protection metrics. This is only if you have turned on the information protection. You need to have the subscription of in the Office 365 or Microsoft 365. You need to turn it on in the tenant settings, and if you do that, then you can see here what is going on. Well, you cannot see it here. You can have a link to where you can see it. Actually, it's similar to the users and audit logs. It will take you somewhere else, and you need to be able to access those. If you don't, you should need to have access to see it. But you have the ability as an administrator to turn on if the data protection metrics are, if the Microsoft information protection is used or not in the tenant settings. So as you can see, some of these things is a very like a cooperation between the Microsoft 365 admins and the Power BI admins. Featured content is another one where you can you can add things. So you can decide if people are allowed to add featured content. And if they are allowed to add featured content, you will see the featured content here. What featured content is basically on your home when you come into Power BI, you can have things featured here. So you can decide that a report or data set, something that has been created is featured. And that can be very, very useful if you have created something new you want to make users aware of. But again, handle it with care, because if you open this up for everyone, then everyone might try to feature the things for the same users, and it's going to be a chaos. So rather make sure, what I normally recommend is that you turn this on for maybe a group of users that are responsible for a business unit or a department or something that makes sense that they can feature for those people. So that was the tenant settings and the admin portal with all the settings that you can do. As you can see, there's quite a few that are useful. Some of them are simply informational, or they take you somewhere else where you can do it. As I said, in the beginning, the administrator does have the tenant settings. They have the capacity settings, which is within the tenant, within the admin portal as well. And then they have the gateway. So these are the things that they might have the gateway, sorry. So these are the things that you can do as an administrator that a normal user cannot do. This is the only thing that you can do that the normal user cannot do. That is, going in here. But one of the things that you can do that is outside of the portal is, of course, you can use the REST API. You can use the REST API for the whole organization, which makes it very useful if you want to do any kind of monitoring. And that's the next part. So let me just jump over to my slides again. So again, I have just, I've just listed things that I think you should be aware of, making for transition and document it and monitor all the change of it. In the capacity administration, and I say Gen 1 because this Gen 2 is just come out, the capacities. There are differences in what you need to do and can do in Gen 1 and Gen 2, because that in Gen 1 you have capacities that are you buy hardware or resources that are both CPUs and memory, while in Gen 2 you're basically just buying CPUs and you can use a lot of memory. You can use much more memory than your your capacity is really really is. Only one each data set is you can be the same as your the tenant the capacity you're buying. So it's a little bit different, but most of it will apply as well. So as I said before, buying capacity is not done. Resizing is also not done by the Power BI administrator, but user assignment, workload settings, restarting the capacities, assigning them. And just be aware of that if you have Power BI Premium, that not all the artifacts that are in Power BI will be in your capacity. And this is really, really important if you are using multi-geo. So if you are buying capacity in one geographical area, because you want all your data to be in that area, and then you buy maybe another one in another area because you want everything to be within that area. these four here, Excel workbooks, push datasets, streaming datasets, and Q&A, are stored always in your home tenant. So if you have multi-geo, you should, avoid using any of these things if you want to, at least for these capacities, because they will not stay within the capacity. And if that's really important to you, then make note of that. Okay, that was the administrator and its role of the administrator and what the administrator does. So what about governance, and how does the administrator fit into governance? So in my mind, the governance is a vital part of any implementation, and it should be thought in to the planning from the start. Now, my experience is that that never happens, unfortunately. So there's never too late to start your governance efforts. But as I said, the sooner you start, the better it is. In my model, the governance, effort or the governance strategy has 4 pillars. It has processes, it has training, monitoring, and roles. And by looking at those, you might realize that only one of them is technical in any way, and that's the monitoring part. The rest of them are non-technical. So they are more about, how you do things and why you do things and who does things. And that is often something that people leave behind. So they don't do that effort. They think, I'm going to do governance. I'm just going to do the monitoring part. The other 3 are really, really important as well. But if you are a Power BI administrator, you might be responsible for some of it or all of it. Most likely, you're going to be responsible for the monitoring. You might be responsible for some of the processes, or at least you should have an input in some of the processes. And of course, you are one of the roles that are in there as well. Training, depending on where you are and what you do. So I'm going to take each one of these with just one slide, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about monitoring, because that's the one that the Power BI administrator is normally responsible for. So the processes is really, really important, and this is something that I see far too seldom implemented, and I think it's something that everyone should be thinking about, because it will deliver a lot of value. You deliver a lot of value by helping people understand what they need to be doing. So I normally suggest a development process, a publishing and sharing process. There's usually one process, but it might be 2 depending on how you set up with your deployments. Security process, naming standard process, support process, and then a documentation of the tenant settings, which I showed you a little bit before and I talked about as well. So I recommend that you write these processes and you get them to people, everyone that has anything to do with Power BI. And the reason why I think this will make sense is that if you create those processes, then people know what to do first time, because you can very easily go into the I don't know if you remember when we talked about the Excel hell, when we had Excel files all over the place. It can happen with Power BI. You can have just things called differently. You have multiple copies of the same thing all over because nobody can see what everyone else is doing. And having good processes in place will help you make things, help the users do things right in the beginning. And in my experience, end users are actually really, glad that when you deliver process like that to them, because then they will see, what to do. And these are normally maybe 2-3 pages each. It's not a lot, and it's, it doesn't have to be a really, heavy process. But any good process will, just tell people how to do things, how to do publishing, how to create a workspace. If you're not allowed to create workspace, how do I get one created for me? How do I store my Power BI desktop file and make sure that unauthorized people don't get access to the data in it? And all of these different things, is something that I think you should be doing. It's probably one of the most important pillar, but it's one that it's overseen a lot. A lot of people just don't do that one. Training is also very important, and I normally split it up into 2 things. Is training in the tool, so how train people to use Power BI. That's normally Power BI Desktop and the Power BI Service, of course. And it might be third-party tools, Tabular Editor or DAX Editor, or using Azure DevOps, so something that you will if you want to, depending on how complex your processes are. But also training in the governance. So tell people where your documents are. You can require them to read it, but at least you should get the documents to them so they have an opportunity to read them. And I will talk a little bit later about how you can do that. And train everyone, not just the developers, train also the end users. You don't have to have a formal training with people sitting in a classroom for end users, but having short videos or something like that, it will help them with a lot of frustration. Just how do you use a slicer? Okay, what is the filter bar and why? How do you use that? How do you navigate a report? How do you create a bookmark? Personal bookmark. All these different things that you can create very short videos to allow them to have a good experience as well. And of course, you need to have a bigger training program for repo developer, and especially if someone is creating data sets as well, because then they are all of a sudden responsible for how data is handled. And of course, find the right delivery method. Do online courses or do in-person courses when we are allowed to do that again, or have it just videos depending on what the users are. What I have been experimenting with and has been going okay is that if you harvest, you can question the Microsoft 365 audit log, not the audit log, sorry, the Microsoft API, and that API will can tell you who has licenses for Power BI. So that's one of the things you can do, is that if someone new gets a license, send him the governance documentation, and maybe invite them to a training course or training, whatever, however you deliver training. And also you can use the audit log to see if someone creates something for the first time or someone uses Power BI the first time just to view. You can also send them a link to the video courses you created for consumers, or or more information about the governance documentation if they started creating something now. So harvest those data, and then automate the delivery of these training material or the governance material, so you don't have to find people, or people don't have to find themselves. Then there's monitoring, and that's the big part where the Power BI administrator is, because that a lot of the things you can do with the Power BI monitoring of Power BI, you have to be an administrator to be able to do it. So, for example, if you want to create a artifact inventory, so basically a report inventory, you need to use some parts of the admin part of the API, and then you need to be a Power BI administrator to be able to get it. To get the list of all the reports in the organization, you need to be an administrator. You can also use the Power BI audit log to monitor activity and inactivity, because if there's inactivity, that might be an issue with your implementation. Or you can use the inactivity to say, I have 150 people that have Power BI Pro licenses, but in the last 6 months, only 75 of them have actually used Power BI to create something. So I can maybe move those licenses somewhere else. So use those APIs to go and fetch those data and bring it down to your to a storage, of course, safe storage, because there are some internal, of course, but still personally identifying data in there, but it's internal data, so it shouldn't be an issue. But put it somewhere safe, and then make sure that you have the whole history. And the reason why you want to be doing that is that in the audit log, which I showed you before, Microsoft 365 will only store 90 days by default. You can change that retention policy depending on your subscription. So you might put it up to 6 months or a year. But no matter what you do, what your retention policy is there, you should be bringing it down, because you want to have history forever. You don't want to lose any history of what people have been doing. And if you are using the the Power BI REST API to fetch the audit log, it will only give you the last 30 days. So you need to start collecting this as soon as possible, so you don't lose data and have a less history than you want. And of course, the Power BI REST API to create your artifact inventory, that's always there. But if you want to have any kind of evolution of your inventory, then you would want to start collecting it as soon as possible. If you want to see that today I had 45 reports, tomorrow I have 46, and then in a year I have 87. If that's important to you to document how your environment has evolved, then start collecting it as soon as possible and store that data, because calling the REST API will only give you a snapshot. This is how it is today. And of course, report on the results. And in just a second, I'm going to be showing you some examples of reports and things you can do. Instead of diving into the monitoring of how you should be doing monitoring, there's plenty of information out there. I rather want to focus on the output of the monitoring in this session and talk about a little bit what you can do about it and what you as an administrator can give to your users and to governors responsible to help them with the job. The last pillar in my strategy for governance for Power BI is roles. It is something people sometimes say, what do you need that for? But in my experience, having defined roles will really help the users who have those roles. Far too often, I come to organization and I found the Power BI administrator, and I found someone who takes care of the gateway and someone who does support or something. They are full-time employees doing something completely different, and this is just something they should be doing as well. And if you don't have it defined, it's very hard for them to justify the time that goes into those tasks. But having the hat on, I am the Power BI administrator. I have been given that hat. It will help others find who is responsible, but it will also help you as an administrator to justify the time that goes into administration. Because as I said, it's not necessarily some part of your job description to be a Power BI administrator, because as I say, a lot of us are accidental administrators. So when you're doing this monitoring, when you're getting data out, if I go back to the monitoring, sorry, I should have had a slide in between here. I would suggest you take these two things, monitor these two things. So what do you have? It's the artifact inventory. And again, if you do it every day, you will see also the what has changed. It's evolving over time, and then of course what people are doing. There are a couple of ways you can do this, but the easiest way to do this is by using the Power BI REST API. It is fairly accessible, but if you have never used a REST API, it can be a little tricky. My advice is to try looking into using PowerShell, because it's the easiest in my mind. I don't know how to write applications, which is another thing you can do. If you are good with REST APIs, you can write applications. You can also use integration tools to call REST APIs directly. For example, Azure Data Factory or integration services. There's a lot of tools who can call REST APIs directly, so you can do that as well. What I found is that using PowerShell is something that is fairly easy to do, and I even found out, even though I'm not very good at PowerShell, so I'm sure you can do as well. For the monitoring, what I suggest is that you read the REST APIs, the activity log, and the inventory. You put it into some kind of a data storage. What I have found really success with is using the cloud and running my PowerShell in Azure Function app, then putting them into blob storage. So the REST API normally returns either a JSON if you call it directly, or if you use some of the commandlets, it will return maybe as a tabular format which you can export to CSV or something like that. Put it into some file storage for archiving. Pick it up with your favorite integration tool. Put it into a database, and then report on it. So let me now just show you a little bit of what you can do with it, because that's the fun thing about it. So let me find here. Here it is. So I have created here 3 reports that are, have a different purpose depending on what you're trying to do. This is by, of course not, a list that is finite list. It's not something that you can do plenty of different things with it, but these are just ideas that I think could make sense. So first of all, I have one that is focused on user activity. This is my small demo tenant, so don't this is something that is very little of it, so don't even though there are very few and spaces between. So I normally start with just some overview. So this is focused on user activity. So how many users are active, how many reports are active, and so on, and what's the most popular things in here. So just a small overview. And then I have pages that are focused on different things that people do. So for example, if I want creating something, I can focus on that. I can see there someone is creating data sets, someone is creating reports, someone is creating dashboards. Nobody is creating apps apparently in my organization. I can see who is doing it, and I can click, of course, on a person and see just whatever that whatever that person is doing. So creating up. So this is basically just an overview of creation, and of course you can do this in whatever way you feel that makes sense. I have viewers, of course, they are the least interesting, of course, when it comes to monitoring. But of course, they can help you. If you want to see who is started using Power BI and you want to send them some material, that's a good one. Who is deleting things? Who is installing app? Who is publishing to web? This is publish to web. Bunch of different things for fun. Who is updated admin setting? And this one is a little interesting because when you use the REST, so the commandlet to get all the information out, when you use the commandlet that is from Microsoft 365, you will get this out, and this is just I filtered down to a single event, and this event is updated admin feature switch. And it doesn't really say what feature switch I updated or what it did. So this is the REST API that comes with Microsoft 365. If you use the REST API with, let me just find it here. Boom, boom, boom. Where did I put it? Here. If you use the REST API with it's been too far. Sorry about this. Of course, this won't do whatever I want. Sorry about this. I had hoped to not have to do this. Let's see if this works. Oh, okay, it does matter. So if you use the get Power BI activities event, which is a commandlet for the Power BI REST API, it will give you that what the switch was. It won't give you what it was switched to unless you outputted the whole JSON. If you output the whole JSON, you will actually see what was outputted. So I have actually I have an example of that here. I had it run in another in the IC. So you can if you can see this, I don't know if you can see this. So I have the sorry about this, because this is a very important one. If you're interested in what people are changing in the admin portal, in the tenant settings of the admin portal. I have way too many things. So I have updated admin feature switch. Who did it? What was the tenant setting that was changed, and what was it changed to? So switch state, which was changed to true. As again, so you won't get what it was changed from. So you need to be thinking about it. So I used the Microsoft 365 commandlet to get the. So I don't have that in what it was changed to. So think about that, how you're going to get it. Switch over to Power BI if you want to get that. And I have, of course, updated data flows, all these different things, downloaded reports from the service, and imports, which are the publishing. Someone publishes from Power BI Desktop. That is what they have been doing. Another report, I know I'm running out of time a bit. So another report that I want to show you is that a report catalog. So I have just the same overview and the start, but what you can really do, can be really, really useful for your end users. If you have a report and if you have some metadata about the report. So what I have done here is that I have actually, when someone creates a report, they get sent a Microsoft form, which they need to fill out with the description and what the confidentiality of the report is. And that can be whatever you want, what kind of metadata you want. And then I add it to my data model. So I have a report, I have a description, I have what the confidentiality of it is, I have who owns it, and what department they're in. So I'm better at filling out my department in my tenant. And then what is some of the how you apply for access. So you can click on this link here to apply for access to this particular report. So the reason why I think this is really important is that A user doesn't know what exists because they only see what they have been given explicit access to. By having a report such as this, you are giving them an opportunity to see what exists in the whole tenant. And of course, you might only allow them to see certain part of it, but generally speaking, I think they can know what exists that will prevent them from doing duplicate reports, and it will also help you to make sure that people are have access to whatever they need, so they can apply it here. So, and you can do the same thing for data sets, and you can do the same thing for data flows, and of course dashboards and so on and so forth. So in data flows, actually, you can fill out the description in the service, and if you do that, it will come up here. So these are the things that I think you should be doing with your monitor data. How you actually do the monitoring, there are plenty of information online for that. So I think you'd be taking a look at that. So hopefully you found it interesting. As I said, I have my contact information here. If you are interested in getting in touch or asking any more questions, if you don't have the question remembered right now, if you remember them later, you can send them to me and we can have a chat about it. So that was it for me. I'm almost done with the time. I don't know how we are gonna go with the questions now, or
if you're happy with that, I will share my screen, and I've made a log of all the questions as we've been going through. I hope to make things a little bit easier. I think you've probably answered a lot of them as we've gone through, but it's probably just worth a recap on these. Hopefully you can see them.
Okay. So do you know of any best practices or reference documentation around settings that can inside a Microsoft Admin portal? So there's someone who has suggested the enterprise deployment paper, but that doesn't really go through every setting in the I wouldn't say that you can really say that there is of course best practice around sharing, but it's very individual for organizations, because what is acceptable in one organization is not acceptable in another. So what you would probably want to do is go through all of them. So now you took away the sharing of the.
That's not me. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me try and get it back.
Yes, and of course we will see the slides. Are you able to change those settings using PowerShell or only through the GUI? Only through the GUI. There's no way to change the settings in the PowerShell, unfortunately. Are those inclusive of your Teams workspaces? Yes. If those Teams workspaces were created and you have, if you have not turned off so you can go in and say prevent people from creating type 1 workspaces. If you have turned that off in the tenant settings, they won't come in there anymore. But otherwise, everything is going to be in there, all the groups and everything. How can a Premium Workspace admin who is not a Power BI admin get a view detailed metrics of how their workspace is performing? If you are a workspace, Premium Workspace admin, you should be able to. You need to be a capacity admin, which is not the same as being a Power BI admin. So if you have been given in the permission to assign capacities, you can install the Power BI Premium Capacity Metrics app, I think it's called. It's basically in your app, in the apps in Power BI. Search for it, and it will pop up there, and you can install it, and it's going to show you the capacity you have permission for, and it will show you the performance of those. That is changing in the version 2. So if you have enabled the Gen 2, that app will not be a part of it. How can we collect the data automatically from Power BI API? By running PowerShell your own, by calling the REST API regularly. So as I said, I use PowerShell within a function app in Azure, but you can run PowerShell from locally on your computer or on a server, or you can build an application around it and then just schedule that to run and export the data into some storage place where you can then use it. But as I say, there are a lot of information about that. If you attended BITS, I had a session on exactly that. That is available. If you are someone interested in PBI admin, I would recommend this book. Fantastic, thank you. Could you share the links where you can use the PowerShell scripts or Power BI for Power BI admin activities? So what I can do is that I can actually add some links to my slides before I send it, and those links will have links to good material about that, and some examples of PowerShell code detail. Okay, I think that was all the questions, unless there's something else.
No, I think that is all of them. So thank you again so much for covering what is such a critical role when it comes to Power BI deployments. But as you said, it's often not considered up front. Great session. In fact, we had more than 100 people join, so really popular. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Thanks again.
Hopefully all of them are thinking about doing this right now.
Yes, let's hope so. As we said up front, we've recorded the session and we'll make it available on the YouTube site. We'll also share the slides as well. That'll probably go up onto YouTube in the next week or so. So looking forward to next month's session. Apparently, it seems every other year I present the December session. I think that's just chance. And this year is certainly no exception. So next month, I'll be doing a deep dive into icon map. I know I cover mapping a lot, and the icon map session, I always cover icon map to some degree, but it's usually in the last 5 minutes at the end. And I've had a lot of requests for some in-depth instruction as to how to make the best use out of icon map. So I'm going to do a full hour session on it, and I'm sure we'll have some Christmas fun along the way as well.
What is that? The next meeting?
Yeah, good point. So we still need to work out the date. We're never quite organised enough to have got there in the previous month. I've still to write the session, which is the honest answer.
Whenever James gets the session ready.
Yeah, it will. But so keep an eye on our social media sites. We'll announce it on Meetup, Twitter, and LinkedIn up front. So I'm sure we'll get the date worked out in the next few days and post it up there. And then that will put pressure on me to get the session finished, won't it? So yeah, I think that is everything. So yeah, thanks again, and thank you everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Oscar. Really appreciate it. It was really good session. Can I ask everyone to please feedback, testing the feedback form again? It would be really useful for us and also for the speaker. We really appreciate feedback. But yeah, you all enjoy your rest of your day and please feedback. Thank you, Oscar.
Bye.
Bye.